Hi, this is Matt from Working Fintech, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Pavir Patel, who is the Head of Business Development and Strategy at Bitpanda Pro, and he's just moved over from JP Morgan, obviously one of the world's leading investment banks. He's going to be interviewed today by Jag, who is doing a Masters of Physics at the University of Leicester. Hi Pav, welcome to this podcast, and over to you, Jag.
Thanks for joining us, Pavir. It's great to have you on the podcast. Could you maybe just kick things off by giving a bit of an introduction on your career so far?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Pavir Patel. I am currently at Bitpanda. So Bitpanda is a crypto and neo broker, which is based in Austria. But before this, as Matt was mentioning, I was at JP Morgan, where really that was my first job out of university. I studied at Nottingham. I did economics, did an internship in my second year, and got a job there as a graduate. That was a rotation type of role in the market side. So my first two were in operations. The first was doing sales support for the rates derivatives desk. And that was really interesting because I think economics is a choice from many at uni, but doesn't really teach you about financial markets or like the trading side so specifically, and especially about derivative products. And I feel like every step of my career has kind of been building on the prior knowledge that I've had, and it's been super cool. So the second one was the trading side for trade support for the emerging markets hybrids desk, and they trade very complex products which are generally illiquid, so they don't do as many deals overall as like an equities desk. And it really gave me an insight into all the risks that derivatives traders had to manage. And after that, I became a product manager, and I think that was the great thing about the JP Morgan rotation scheme, is that you got to try a little bit of different things in different places. And as a product manager, I was working with developers, user experience designers, to create websites, applications for our research and analytics business. So this is enabling kind of the buy side to look at JP Morgan data in a product which is called Data Query, and also read our research and publications through our site overall. And that was really cool because I feel like everything in finance to that point had been a little bit intangible. And then I think with the, seeing like a product come to life that you've literally kind of sketched out, worked with the UX designers, and then kind of created is a really, really awesome feeling. And I guess with JP Morgan, through that experience, I was working with a fintech company. That was my first real introduction to fintech. That was a natural language processing startup, which was only 2 people when we initially started working with them. And we did a proof of concept as part of the product team, integrated them into our research process overall, and kind of saw that whole incubation project from end to end. And we ended up investing into the company and still use it today. During that kind of process, I switched into what was called the Fintech team, and now like a digital strategy team. And it was a really interesting time, I think, to be joining these teams because they were going through a bit of evolution. So I think Fintech about 4 years ago for JP Morgan was working with either a really, really large provider like a Bloomberg, or a really small provider which we were going to incubate and give a lot of, I guess, time, resources, and effort to kind of seeing if the product works. And how that evolved was being much more baked into the overall strategy of the bank, into the market side, into the investment banking side. And the setup in JP was actually really good because they had a head of digital markets, a head of digital investment banking, which our team was able to support on any fintech partnerships, investments, acquisitions. And so I was doing that for the past 3 years. I also went out to Hong Kong for 2 years, which the mobility in JP Morgan is so good, 1 across roles and then 2 across regions. And that was a really awesome experience, giving me a whole new, exposure to a different fintech landscape, different way of working and culture. And also kind of seeing from kind of the more ground up fintech getting set up for JP Morgan in the Hong Kong and Asia region. After that, so I loved that. I loved Hong Kong. Loved my time there, and I loved the time at JP Morgan actually. Was looking for something new, and I was kind of close to going to either a venture capital type of role or a startup role. I felt like I wanted to get the startup experience first, and I've always been interested in crypto, and that neatly was able to combine both with the opportunity at Bitpanda, which has been really fun so far.
Leading on from the fintech talk, every guest that we've had on the podcast so far has their own personal definition of fintech. What's your own personal definition of fintech yourself?
So I think fintech like 1.0 was really enabling access and an enhanced user experience to end users. And really it was this whole theory of unbundling where smaller companies were taking a piece of a large banking service and just doing that really well with an awesome user experience. I think FinTech 2.0 has been really the infrastructure layer, so enabling non-financial companies to embed financial services. And that could be from payments, that could be lending. And I think the third one, which is really emerging now, is the whole crypto ecosystem where value is kind of transacted on-chain, and you have really innovative business models coming out, like the play-to-earn type of crypto models within the gaming space, which is just fascinating. It's also cool because these three steps of fintech are maturing at different speeds across the world, and I would not want to undersell how important fintech 1.0 is for places in emerging markets, which is really helping get access to financial products, including things like credit. And I think the more developed economies are going through 2 and 3 a bit more quickly.
You said that you wanted to get the startup experience essentially. What prompted the change in career from traditional finance to a fintech more specifically?
So I think I was interacting with fintech companies a lot, Matt included, in my time at JP Morgan, and I always had a feeling like I really liked the startup environment, where you're dealing with kind of more uncertainty, maybe given slightly more responsibility, and I think as well, the position that JP Morgan is in is top 3, definitely top 5 in everything it does. And I kind of wanted the more underdog startup experience where you're really fighting against competition, because I thought it would be a really good learning experience for me overall. And I think people are incentivized slightly differently in startups too, with things like equity, which can be quite interesting. And I think after you've done for me close to 7 years in a large corporate, sometimes you want to change of environment. And I've talked to a few people, and it seems to be that 6 or 7 year mark where people decide to make a move.
And how transferable of the skills that you've learned so far into your role? And your role is looking at institutional kind of crypto trading, so I'm sure there's probably quite a lot of transferable skills there. But what about more of the generally in a startup, you need to be quite a generalist, because one day you're doing sales, one day it's marketing, one day it's products, one day it's coding, one day it's something different. How are you finding that transition?
Yeah, no, I'm loving it so far. I think, as I kind of mentioned, my skill set has only been building. So I think my first experiences were getting an understanding of financial markets. That's so critical to crypto. Because it's really kind of building financial markets and almost even a bank from the ground up. A lot of the types of skills that I learned within the innovation and fintech team, which is do we partner with someone, what would be the cost to build, is actually invaluable type of business modeling when we look at how do we grow our business, who should we partner with, what market should we target, how much do we need, and how many people should we hire. So I think that was very transferable. And also for sales, I think with JP Morgan, you're always trying to sell internally as someone who's looking at innovation, because you have to get quite a few decision makers around the table and really buy into the idea which you're pitching. And those are definitely transferable now as we speak to institutional clients and partners.
And it's probably early days yet because you've only been a Bitpanda Pro for, was it a few months or so? But in terms of thinking back now when you were finishing university and looking at jobs and so on, would you have chosen a startup straight off the bat rather than going into a bank? Do you think there's advantages over one over the other?
I think at the time I didn't have such a wide horizon of what the different types of jobs were out there. I didn't certainly know what fintech was. I felt like the options facing someone from economics was like consulting, like somewhere in finance, which would be kind of investment banking, trading, sales, or operations, and so that's the kind of path that I ended up choosing. I think that some of the training programs are really good within these big institutions, and also I was lucky in the fact that I got the exposure to so many teams, like almost 5 and 7 years, and so for me that's been really good. But I think now if I was coming out as a grad, the whole I guess culture around working in a startup and working in fintech has changed, and I would definitely consider initially working for a fintech or startup myself. And when I'm speaking to, let's say, my brother who recently graduated from USC doing computer science, I'm saying to him now, like, yeah, you can start your own business now, or you can join a very early company, which would give you a very broad range of experience early on.
And that's the whole point of this podcast series actually, is to elaborate on exactly that point, because for you and I, we're in fintech and it's a really exciting place to be. There's loads of jobs, there's loads of opportunity, there's lots of investment money. It's an industry that's going to be going 10x or more in the next 5 to 10 years. And I think it's only just beginning to start with your fintech 1.0, your 2.0, your 3.0 with crypto and the NFTs and that kind of infrastructure that's been built as well, and everything just being more accessible. And what we want to do as work in fintech is to remove that knowledge, or fill in that knowledge gap around what is fintech, how to get into it, where are the courses. The conversation you've been having with your brother, we're trying to scale that. so I think, and for anyone listening to this podcast as well, do get in touch with us if you want to learn about these things, because I think Pav here is a shining example of someone that's gone in a traditional route successfully into JP Morgan and learned skills there, but has now moved into fintech, and actually I'm sure it's probably a more exciting place to be.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting, because I don't think you should lower your horizons depending on like what you studied or whatever. I think there's people say fintech and people immediately think, oh, I don't have the development or like technology skills related to that. But I think, yeah, I'm an example, and lots of other people are examples of people who may have a more, to be honest, and they started in operations. So I think, you can have an operations role. There's roles in fintechs in marketing, obviously business development, strategy, finance. Any fintech company is a business at the end of the day. And so I think really for all graduates across different subjects that they've studied should be able to find something in fintech which really works for them. I think actually, because sometimes fintech companies are they're a lot smaller, they might not have as well defined graduate schemes. It may be easier to reach out to individuals via LinkedIn or Twitter, or if you're in crypto, Twitter, getting jobs on Twitter is actually a thing. Is a lot easier now. So, and their hiring process, or like at least kind of work experience internship process, may be easier than some of the banks these days. And I think what we really look for in the hiring side for someone who's junior is like demonstrable passion. And when we're looking at a CV, it's really obviously useful to understand where someone studied, what type of work experience they've thrown them into. But it's really that kind of extracurricular stuff which demonstrates to us that you have, if you're applying for crypto, you should know about a few different crypto protocols or projects that you're really interested in, similar to fintech. Like we interviewed someone at JP Morgan for a fintech role, and unfortunately the candidate couldn't name like a fintech company they were really interested in. That kind of for us is a bit of a red flag.
Cool. So you mentioned a keen interest in crypto, and Bitpanda is or I read online that Bitpanda is one of the fastest growing fintechs with over 3 million users. How do you see the digital asset space evolving in the short and the long term?
Yeah, so I think, Bitpanda's been around for a very long time. It was founded in 2014 by three founders based in Austria, recently raised their Series C funding, attaining a 4 billion valuation, and has grown to about 600 people and 3 million in users. Crypto is really interesting because it started as a very retail-driven investment product, and that's as well kind of where Bitpanda's initial traction has been. I think what's happening now is, and over the past year or so, you've seen a massive increase in institutional clients looking to allocate, but one, invest in crypto, and two, even kind of go to more of the fringes like ownership of NFTs and things like that. It's been interesting because sometimes crypto is detached from blockchain when really they're really the same technology. So a lot of the banks have had programs in place which are kind of focused on operational efficiency and things like that, which the blockchain technology can really give you. I think from here, it's like the institutional adoption of crypto is only going to increase, definitely driven by things like regulatory clarity, which has always been a blocker, to be honest, of the space really getting allocated from the largest asset managers and pension funds and things like that.
Yeah, so you mentioned regulations, and it's definitely an area that needs to evolve. Previous guests that we've spoken to have mentioned other issues in the area as well, such as decentralized identities, wallet addresses, and the blockchain trilemma. Are there any specific areas apart from regulation that you're keen to look at and observe? And what advice would you give to the listeners who want to go out and maybe start a startup and tackle these problems?
Yeah, I think there's blockchain and kind of crypto was really, I guess, formed on the kind of starting principles of decentralization and access for all. It's I think until fairly recently that access has been more limited to your traditional, male, generally white kind of user base. And so I think there's a real opportunity to really use crypto as a mechanism to increase, I guess, financial wealth of the minority type of categories. And I mentioned Axie Infinity or play to earn type of model, but it's really interesting how that type of product is having real traction and giving real wealth to people in the Philippines who are like essentially playing a game but making real income for them, their families, and the economy overall. And I think it's instances like that which I think need to be a lot more widespread. It's interesting when we think about crypto as a payment layer, how that can easily bank, I guess, the unbanked with a mobile phone and digital wallet. So there's real opportunities out there to increase access to financial services, and I do think crypto is a really crucial part of that.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, El Salvador legalized Bitcoin as legal tender a couple of days ago. Although there was a crash on the same day, and that there are issues with the wallet. Apparently, that is definitely promising. And I think Panama are also thinking of doing the same. So maybe for South American countries, it's a way forward to get out of hyperinflation and stuff like that. So very, very interesting. Leading on to maybe NFTs. So we interviewed Benjamin Ahmed on Saturday, the 12-year-old who made almost $500,000 selling NFTs. And there's also been a sale of an Etherrock NFT for $1.3 million. What's your personal opinion on NFTs? Is it a space in a bubble, or will prices get even more crazy? Yeah, what's your thoughts?
It's almost impossible to predict crypto prices, especially for NFTs. It is astounding the amounts of sums, like the dollar notional sums that some of these NFTs can sell for. I think it depends, because some NFTs are driven by kind of a social and community aspect, which is kind of how much is everyone willing to pay for this item. Some of these NFTs have been now linked to membership, so that's like the Bored Ape Yacht Club, for example, has certain real world benefits and perks, and so it's hard to say, is someone overpaying or underpaying for that, because people pay for social memberships into like the hundreds of thousands of pounds a year anyway. So this is an online version of that. And I think the number of creators who are now looking at NFTs is pretty cool too. On a price side, that could increase supply, so potentially drop in price overall. But at the same time, it's really interesting just to see what people are building within the space overall. The one as well, which people thought was pretty crazy, and it's just like a really new innovative model, was Loot, which is essentially an NFT of a black background with words on, which may have certain attributes in non-existing NFT games. Yeah, so this could be like you have a sword, or like you have 10x speed, or whatever it is. So people are being really creative in some of these ecosystems.
And following on from Jag, you mentioned Benjamin, who we interviewed last week. Benjamin's now a member of Working Fintech. He's joined our clan, which is great to have him on board. One of the things which he is looking at in the long term is to build a billion-dollar infrastructure business. On that kind of last point you were talking about, the ability to create skins or weapons or cosmetics or avatars or digital commodities which will exist in a digital world. And I think that's something that we plan to explore more in this podcast series, is the convergence between crypto, NFTs, and the metaverse, because there needs to be an interoperable currency that exists and interoperable commodities that exists for use within the digital world as well. So I think we're just getting started with that.
No, I mean, it's really interesting, like obviously Facebook having a lot of plays within the metaverse for a number of years with Oculus and generally it's social networks and DM. But I think last year or this year announcing that is their next kind of phase of their platform development to create a metaverse, which, depending on where things go, may be interoperable but I guess we'll see how that develops. I think what's really cool for people just like listening who are interested is that the access to mint or create an NFT is super easy, and with a lot of the layer 2 solutions or side chains can be really cheap as well. So you can do that on Polygon or Matic and BSC and not pay the fees that you have to in Ethereum. And it's super easy just to test out, list it on one of the marketplaces like OpenSea, and kind of get started from there. And so I think that's what's cool about crypto, is that it's enabling access to creators and financial products.
Yeah. Most of our listeners tend to be students and graduates, and that's mainly what Working Fintech is geared towards, advice and everything fintech. You've been in the world of work for almost a decade now, at JP Morgan and now Bitpanda Pro, and I'm sure you've learned a lot during that time. What advice would you give to your younger self if you would, and is there anything that you would have done differently if you could go back?
Yeah, when you say almost a decade, that makes me feel really old. But I think I think you kind of need to focus on and spend time where you're most passionate, I would say. I think what I was maybe not so good at is also identifying where my potential weaknesses were early on, and kind of recognizing that and putting more directed effort to improving that. I think I only really got like the motivation to work really hard when joining JP Morgan. I feel like I could have done more in my time, at university, in kind of extracurricular activities which are net beneficial to my learning experience, outside of just the normal university work and socializing. So I feel like that was potentially a missed opportunity for me, which I think people may just get caught up in the uni experience and not give enough time to.
Yeah. And finally, a more personal question to end on. Do you have any book recommendations, hobbies, or routines that you follow which you find to be useful in your everyday life?
So yeah, book recommendations. I really liked Loon Shots by Pavir Patel. It's really about how, I mean, he's a really awesome writer, and it's like really inspiring figure who is trying to distill what the core features of innovation are within kind of larger entities. I think it was really interesting reading that whilst in a very big entity, which is JP Morgan, and some of the learnings there are definitely applied in Bitpanda. I think, in terms of routines, doing really basic things like exercising, walking. I've got two dogs, so like walking my dogs in the morning, just getting outside. It really just sets the day up pretty well. Even in those times when you're kind of doing all-nighters, working super hard, it's good to have that mental break, which those things kind of afford you to.
Great, thanks a lot, Pav. So I think people listening, and particularly if you're studying or you're just beginning to get into your career, do look at fintech. And Pav's an example here of someone who worked at a leading tier 1 US bank. I'm sure you were getting well paid there as well, but you've made the leap to go into the world of startups where you have more autonomy, you've got more responsibility, I'm sure. But in terms of your rewards, what you're seeing in a quicker, more real-time fashion from decisions that you're making is something which exists in a startup and doesn't really exist in big financial institutions. So how's that kind of pace of life settled with you now you've been there for quite a few months now at Bitpanda Pro?
I feel like I've helped make more decisions in my 2 months at Bitpanda than potentially 2 or 3 years at JP Morgan. It's incredible the pace at which a startup is able to take in information, perform some analysis, like the necessary amounts of analysis to make a decision, and actually make a decision, commit, and execute. I feel like all parts of that in JP Morgan were slower. It's just a part of the nature of the beast, given how many people are involved in the decision-making process. Obviously, there's like the regulatory and compliance teams which have to be led along the way. There's also on the tech side, I guess, restrictions on using kind of cloud-based software. So even as simple things like working on a Google Slides thing in collaborative real time, like that's such a basic efficiency gain from moving from startup from corporate to startup. But no, I'm loving it so far. It's just I think you have to be more comfortable with dealing with a bit of uncertainty. You're not going to know all the answers, but that's actually how you learn, where you push just outside your comfort zone, and applying all the skills that I've hopefully learned at JP Morgan. And so I think it's a great option to kind of get to work in a fintech, in a leading fintech, and really experience its growth. My specific team is around 18 people now. Obviously, the Bitpanda as a whole is 600. So I feel like my experience is going to be a startup within a scale up. which to me gives you really the benefits of both. And I think if you are considering, going to a grad scheme at a bank or at a consultancy or wherever, I think there's still really great options and great learning experiences overall. But you may be tempted, I'm sure, at the 6-year mark or earlier, to hop into fintech, where I think the upside can be bigger. The projects that you work on, you kind of given a more responsibility, and it's just kind of faster and more exciting overall.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for joining us today, Pavir Patel. Enjoy your ride on the rocket ship.
Thanks for that. Thanks, Jag. See you later.
Cheers, Pav.